December 31, 2022. I had just fallen to my knees on the bathroom floor in what I have now come to understand as a defining moment of commitment. The incessant primal questioning of when to fight was overcome by the soulful knowing of when to surrender. My partner and I of 4 years had decided with a mutuality and love to separate. The feeling of separation to that which we are attached to. There is nothing quite like it other than death. It can be all-consuming, and it was. Particularly to one who sees the world through the eyes of an individual separate to that in which it sees. I place my hands on my forehead to the ground as I declare my devotion. I surrender. I surrender. This moment was never about giving up for me or being powerless. It was about trust and the strength and power that in fact comes from this. In a position of pure service, an undeniable expression of devotion through both my physical orientation and frequency of vibration, I was catapulted by a strike of ecstasy, divine intervention. I realized the conditioned illusion. My humanity was overwhelmed by a sense of fragmentation, but not my spirit. That was being awakened after decades of ignorance and self-imposed egoic monarchical oppression. I was bringing light to dark, consciousness to unconsciousness, soul to the underlying endurance of what it is to be human. I let out a sigh that was holistically healing in the exhale. Generations that came before me being released from their hypnotized delusion founded in institutionalized and intentional systemized condemnation that had been carried in a traumatic timeline to now, to this moment. As I rose to my feet with a newfound level of certainty and conviction, a commitment to no longer carry forward the burden of purgatory of perceived isolation, a new echo now being spoken into the genetic expression. I am held. We are held by a collective, an energetic consciousness that binds us. Eternally bound, individual, and undivided. Hello, beautiful beings. It has certainly been a while since we last connected, and to be candid, personally the depth in which I desire to connect with you I feel has hardly touched the surface. This podcast, To Be Human, was founded on this intuitive yearning to explore my capacity and significantly closer to the truth, my fear of self-expression. In relation of this episode's expose, it appears I've progressed in this transformation and dissolution. Moving forward, it is important for me to be transparent with you. I'm not clear on the evolution of this podcast, just that it is an evolution. With change, growth, and progress, clarity is all but a glimmer of hope in a world of uncertainty. But I believe that is what makes this all so captivating. That a world of uncertainty can also be a world of pure possibility. In a dualistic paradigm of ending, there are also new beginnings. In September 2022, a year ago to this day, I woke up one morning to an underlying all-embodied visceral anxiety. A state of confusion washed over me as I stared up at a familiar ceiling that now strangely felt so foreign. Why did the corners upon which I was staring appear sharper than I remember? The white appearing not as pure, and the temperature abrasive, frigid, and cool. The resonance of questioning lingered until with a bold, blunt, and blatant force it hit me. Mind aroused and pupils dilated, I realized that despite all the memories that were sacredly held within this wholesome and loving space, a temple of nurturance, warmth, and healing, it had now suddenly become a house that no longer felt like home. In a somewhat fearful fashion, I immediately suppressed this feeling of disorientation. Though I was spinning around in a Milky Way absent of solid ground and in force vortex of the unknown, what I did know was this: that if I truly faced what had come to present itself, that my life would drastically and undeniably change, pulled apart between atmospheres and separated from that which I was attached to despite the difference in gravity. At this point in time, I was just not ready. Consumed by my unreadiness, I subconsciously and instinctively began to subtly push my partner away. In a cowardice manner, it is easier to create hate than to recognize what feels like the unruly dismantling of love. Fortunately for me, I had an emotionally intelligent partner that was able to recognize immediately my expanding path of destruction and intentional disconnection. And so we sat down and had a radically honest conversation. One founded in not making any rash decisions, but one also acknowledging a rash feeling of change. Accelerating forward 4 months to where this episode began, December 31, 2022. I was in the bathroom releasing a deep exhale, the attempted discharging of a matched deep internal discomfort. I caught myself transmuting pain into a smile as I nurtured myself through an expression of lightheartedness. Anyone that has experienced a breakup, I am sure, can empathize with the somewhat brutality and chaoticness of it. It's like the partial relief of a smile can be just enough to not have you feel like you were literally dying. I think reflecting back now, I realized in that moment that I required something more long-term and profound, that I was not going to allow myself to go through another separation that was fueled by starvation and sleepless nights. I had done that, and I don't think I was ever better for it. Through a recent yet expansive exploration of self-development, I understood in this moment that how I relate to myself and others essentially creates my experience, and that it was now time to not only understand but to also integrate the missing piece of this holy trifecta. Up until a few years ago, I had a very strong and visceral abandonment wound, so potent that simply someone walking out the door could leave me feeling deeply alone. I'd repressed this for years in a well of embarrassment and shame. I cognitively understood I was not being abandoned, but my body never quite mirrored the mental insight. Throughout the COVID lockdown, I made it my mission to use the downtime to free myself from this, and I'd say I did a transformational job of it, but there were certainly remnants that were revealing themselves to the surface throughout this separation. It had become clear that though I'd substantially healed the journey of feeling connected with oneself, there remained an element of disconnection with everything other than I. And so as I began to focus on me with me, or essentially me without him, I realized it wasn't about me at all, or him. It was about God and the fundamental relationship with life itself. As a self-labeled nonconformist, my era of disruption began at a young age, with intentionally separating myself from religious practice and thought. And as a consequence of this, I always found it quite uncertain as to what to believe in. Once someone who took pride in righteously claiming that I was an atheist, as I began to get older, my pull towards opposition became triumphed by my exploration and deeper connection to my own sense of truth. A truth now founded in the knowing that there exists something greater than myself of myself, something more extensive than the 5 sensory experience. And so when I say it was about God, what I mean is, it was about something so vast in its existence that is not to be cognitively perceived or logically conceived, but to be felt, with something within us that cannot be accurately defined within the limitations and worldly constraints of language. Now I understand that this is moving into the space of esoterics and magic, but since when should my truth, our truth, be defined, confined by anyone else's imagination but our own? Wherever you are right now, I want you to look around and for a moment entertain that in which you see is indeed that in which you seek. Life is a mirror, a reflection of both shadow and light, a picturesque mosaic of the Creator residing within and of you. Your life is all but a flicker, a moment in time. And you can choose to feel separated to that in which I speak, to feel isolated to that in which you see, to deceive yourself that you are the I in which you define. Or you can give yourself permission to explore other than what you have been conditioned. That day on the bathroom floor, I gave myself permission. I fully surrendered to that which I thought was larger than me. But in the true irony of paradox, I realized that in which I surrendered to, this felt higher power, it was me. Eternally bound, individual, and undivided.